why is trauma, and in particular healing our trauma, because we want to focus on that. We're not just here to rehash it and relive it. We're really trying to focus on healing our trauma. Why is that so tied to recovery and the healing journey?
Well, I think we've already touched on this a little bit in just recognizing that when those things happen to us, especially in our early years, they're things that are stored in our brain for various reasons. But I think that as we continue to live out our lives, and especially into adult life, we can see, if we are honest with ourselves, we can see where those pressure points, where those traumas, where we become triggered in a way that is an indication that something is not right, that this thing, whatever this thing is, that it keeps showing up in all these different areas, and even to the point where I know that I have gotten to a point where I recognize it. I know there's something there, but I'm not ready to deal with it yet, and so I will on purpose shove it down. But I also know that then that's going to play a role in my ability to move forward in my healing, because it keeps popping up for a reason, because it's probably time for me to deal with that, and I'm just not ready to deal with it. So it can become really a huge stumbling block if you're not willing to address it.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a couple guys who are leading a group. One of them was just in my most recent 7 Pillars group. And there was a guy in our group who, whenever someone would share something really traumatic or really like painful, a deep wounding, that this group member would react like laughing, or kind of like a, like one of those kind of things. And it got to the point where I was sharing, and I don't know, this probably isn't good. This is why this section isn't in the group leader training course, but I like reacted in the moment, like, you laugh every time I bring this story up. What is going on? And I eventually was like, I think this is a response to trauma. And we were able to unpack it. But what I found, and what he found through kind of that conversation, was that humor was something he found to then mask that pain or that difficulty. And there was stuff that had happened early in his life with his dad that was really, really difficult for him. And his escape was to go to humor. And so when it comes to recovery, it's the same thing. We find something to mask that pain and that difficulty. And so if we don't know what that mask is covering up, what pain or difficulty is really underneath, then we can't ever heal from that thing. Now, I don't know if he's healed from laughing at people sharing their deepest, darkest truths or whatever, but it was just a really, because I think sometimes understanding it, not just focused or emphasized in sexual addiction, but looking at it even outside of that, can help us understand even more our addiction and how that plays out because of trauma.
Yeah, interesting connection. We found out earlier, well, I guess it was last year, that our oldest daughter's trauma response is laughter. Because we had a situation where we were on a hike with the 3 of us, my wife and I and her, and my wife fell in a way that was kind of dramatic and a little frightening, and our daughter was laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? She's like, I don't know. and we did get to process it, like we're all okay now, and my wife was okay, thankfully. But it was scary for a minute, and so I've got this huge concern, and someone's laughing. You're like, what is going on? But that's a good point, that when our brain doesn't know what to do, it may respond in ways we're not really even sure why. And rather than beating ourselves up about it, it's learning to pay attention to, I'm handling this in a way that I'm maybe not comfortable with, but that's just what my brain has kind of learned to do. And the thought I was just considering as we talk about why it's so important to the healing journey, and it's because we have seen that healthy relationships, safe relationships, are a huge part of the recovery process and of living in a way of health. And the issue with trauma is that trauma creates messages in our thinking that impact relationships negatively, because we're trying to stay safe so we don't trust people. We're trying to protect ourselves so we don't risk, and relationship involves risk. And so as long as trauma is driving our thinking around relationships, we're not going to enter into the kind of relationships that really heal us and create a healthy way of life as mature, well-functioning human beings that are following Christ and trying to live out of who He says we are. And so we've got to identify the trauma that created the messages so that we can have the tools to learn healthy patterns of relationship as God designed us for, to be in that safe, loving intimacy both with Him and with other people. And so I think that's what I found in group. People are kind of those light bulb moments, those aha moments, like, wow, I've never realized how that moment created maybe a vow in my soul where I said, I'm not going to trust men anymore. I'm not going to trust authority figures. I'm not going to trust the church. I'm not going to risk vulnerability. And that's been impacting them ever since that moment. So when we start to see that and begin to heal it, it just opens a whole new way of doing relationships.